My name is John Yasenko, and I'd like to thank the Arts Symposium, the Society of Automotive Historians, and an International Motor Racing Research Center for my presentation. It's truly appreciated. The image up now is a picture of Ben F. Harris III. This picture is from an SCCA magazine, Indiana Race, July, August 1954. If you would at this time, please pay attention to his attire, as Ben always wore his hat, usually flight glasses. He was a pilot, and he usually had a dress coat on, or he was dressed in the SCCA official material. I mention this so after this is over, if anybody finds anything on Ben, I'd sure like to know about it. An email address is attached at the bottom of the presentation. You'll see ghost images. All of these images will be talked about in the presentation. As Ben built an anomaly in time in 1935, we wanted to just touch upon it because I guess within reason, he kind of built what was to come in the 50s in race car designs and exotic designs. You'll notice there's a AAA license plate on the back of the Speedster. That license plate says AAA official car. Ben, apparently all the way back to when this picture was taken was 1936, was highly involved with the AAA, AAA. We would have to assume that, but it seems to be it's easy to see. One other thing, Richard Taylor, thank you so much. Richard Taylor did this for almost nothing, and he also made blueprints of the car while making this computer-generated image. So we can turn it into the Library of Congress and some other halls of fame as we go along. And remarkably, in 1935, the Speedster was the size of an AC Cobra and a D-type Jaguar. The color of this, by the way, is as close as we can get. DuPont's first ever introduced paint, Duco, chrome metallic Duco lacquer, was put onto the Harris Speedster. This pencil sketch here is from my brother Dan. This is when we first found the car and brought it in, and we were trying to make sense of what we found. My introduction to Ben Harris was a storied past occurred in 1987 while touring a property for purchase in Clarksville, Missouri. The property was a time capsule of partially buried, pedigreed automobiles and of their components. I was drawn to and later purchased the Harris front-wheel drive Speedster because of its unique appearance and the fact that a tree had gone through the center of its cockpit. Furthering that, we could see that it had friction shock absorbers, which I knew was something from the 20s and 30s still, and it just amazed me. I began researching the purchase pre-internet with a little more than this rendering by my brother Dan Yasenko. Owned by David Biggs III, and owner, proprietor of a selected museum for automotive pedigree in Louisiana, Missouri. A fire in 1964 damaged 13 to 18 vehicles in his collection. The Harris front-wheel drive Speedster, in a newspaper article, was considered the most valuable of these vehicles. Yeah, it might be fun to add. There's so many sub-stories that go along with this. But the gentleman that was breaking the Guinness Book of World Record for sitting atop the flagpole actually clogged down. A fire in 1964 damaged 13 to 18 vehicles in his collection. The Harris front-wheel drive Speedster was considered the most valuable of these vehicles in a newspaper article. Other vintage cars damaged included a 58 Ferrari Testarossa, known well to the Ferrari people as Big Red. A factory alloy bodied gull wing with knockoffs, which he raced, a pre-war Mercedes 500 Cabriolet, a Porsche Cabriolet. It was a really rare Alfa Roadster, which actually Ralph Lauren owns one of the four, I believe it was 4 or 5 cars that was built that was special. You'll notice we figured everybody would want to know. I'm always asked what condition is the car in right now. We're blatantly showing you the picture of it sitting there. It is real as the day is long. There are panels right now being restored, and the motor is being finished off right now, which was a 2-cam, 2-distributor, dual carbureted V8 from actually it was built in 1933 and 34. First of its kind, maybe? I don't know. But anyway, that is the condition of the car. There's pictures from my son, Jared Yasenko. The Speedster photo from 52 Chicago Invitational event. My favorite picture that illustrates the size of the futuristic exotic design. Remember, this car was built in 1935. Amazingly, Harris's design and innovations were 17 years old at the time of winning the 5-foot-tall trophy to your right next to Ben. There are some GM executives in this picture here. We have some other ones. And what GM was participating with Ben in this booth. And we do believe this is the one that another friend of Ben's, Chrissy Kanamaki, put a picture and featured Ben's car on the front cover of his magazine for a special edition. We believe it was for this showing, but we're truly not sure. The poster, Ben never really named the car. That's talked about at Auto Puzzles, which some may enjoy reading that story because it brings back forth many, many more facts about Ben and the car. This is a Speedster stretching out its legs on the racetrack. Ben's car started silk chrome Metallica paint, DuPont's first. Actually, the color of that is their patent formula for chrome Metallica paint. Ben's car had many firsts. This picture here, again, you can see it's hard to distinguish, but it is the AAA license plate on the back. And even his license plate from Illinois was special. He had it made somehow. He knew he was a very politically involved person. This is a boardwalk that the Speedster is on. And again, we think this is 46 to 48. We were sent this, and we never did find out who sent. But anyway, this is what it is. And the vehicle did do some racing. Very limited, but it did, which comes in later on in invitationals and such as this. Anyway, we're moving on. The more I learned about the car, the more I became intrigued about the man behind the car. Harris's interest in performance cars wasn't limited to industrial design. He was also an enthusiast who raced in and officiated numerous AAA, SCCA, and FI events in 3 countries. Yes, 3 countries. At Cuba, Nassau, Bahama, and I think 12 states that we have him at, with pictures and magazine articles and stuff. Harris, needless to say, was very active in the SCCA as it transitionalized into a unified national organization. This is relating back to what the executive director of the National SCC brought up in an article in 1959. How did all this happen? In most photos, as I mentioned before, Harris can be identified by a signature English flat hat. This event, to my best knowledge, this was an Indiana event. I can't think of the track, but anyway, this picture is from a national SCCA magazine, and there's another one as we go on. This right here is the only thing we could figure. This is given to us from his family, and it's Benjamin F. Harris was among the vanguards of industrial designers, engineers, and motorsport architects as early as the 1930s. A small sampling of his associates include Gordon Burig, Harley Earl, Ed Cole, Zora Duntoff, James Kimberly, Wacky Arnold, and many, many others. You will see pictures of Ben talking with Carol Shelby in his Maserati. You'll see a lot of different pictures coming up, including with Wacky and everybody else. To further along on this one page here, it brings in the fact being that he was good friends with Fred Duesenberg, Augie's son Fritz, and it brings in that he was best man at Gordon Buring's wedding in Auburn, Indiana, to Betty Whitten. He also brings in talking about Gordon's new book that's going to be published shortly. Ben brings in Harley Earl, which there's a lot to be said there. I have talked to Richard Earl. We've coordinated just a little bit. I gave him some documents that he'd never seen before. And we also talked about the lost history of the car to John Hendricks that owns Discovery Channels and a lot. The 30-year lost history. And I told him what I thought, how that happened. But at the same point in time, he showed me that he'd done a YouTube on that. That's a whole other story. There's a lot of sub stories off this. Next, we're talking about him knowing Harley Earl when he first went to GM. And it talks about in 56, Harley and I guess Zora built him a special Corvette and delivered it to him right out of the styling building at General Motors. Ben took his plate, flew there, picked it up. And while he was there, they also had a real nice luncheon for him with most of the GM hierarchy there at the meeting. I'm sure they coordinate in a lot of ways. We moved out past that. We run into the name Teeter. Teeter is the one that actually was Perfect Circle Corporation. And also he's the one that sued pretty much everybody for stealing his cruise control patent. Yeah, he's the one that designed it. And made it. Then he talks about Colonel Harrington of the contest board, the AAA, and American representative of FIA. I wonder if that's perhaps why Ben was throwing an international flag at Nassau Bahamas Speed Week. He brings in his friendships with Pop Myers, Jimmy Snyder, Peter Collins, Rodriguez Brothers, Phil Hill, Alfred Momo, Alex Ullman, and the great gentleman, start your engines, Wilbur Shaw. By the way, Wilbur Shaw and a few others are pictured in the film that Ben did at one of the races, many races, that he was associated with in officiating and sanctioning. By the way, and just as a brief term, we have not ran into anybody that contributed more to building the national level in rules books and presentations than Ben Harris. That's a bold statement, and but yet we've been at this for 35 years. To finish off here, it talks about him holding SCCA senior competition license, AAA license, and FIA licenses, having served as an SCCA regional executive, member of the National Activities Committee and a former National Vice President and Publications Director, driven to different tracks, stockholder of Road America. I was sorry to learn that the one archivist that I'd spoken with, really a nice guy, had passed away. I was looking forward to working with him, to giving him a bunch of information that they don't have about the beginnings of Road America and how it all happened. And by the way, to contradict a couple of the stories, Ben Harris was a pilot. He owned an airport, and he was constantly flying people like Harley Earl, Wacky Arnold, James Kimberly around to the different tracks and in the meetings they were having in making the national SCCA and also building Road America. And on that point, before I get off, David Biggs' son told me he has records, which he's given me records already, but he stopped short of giving me these. He has records of them driving around in David Biggs' Mercedes cab, 500 cab, filming the Road America before it had any surface put onto it. They were making sure the track was just as they wanted it. And this same book also, along with it being talked about, has rules and regulations that they were talking about adding in. This was probably 52 or 53 when this is filmed. I've tried to get that because it would be great to go with this, especially for Road America to show the real beginnings of shaking the track down. To end this here, it mentions Ben's car won an Indianapolis Custom Car Show in 1951. The reason for this was Wally Parks, and I can't think of the owner's name of Hot Rod Magazine, ran a full-page ad looking for Ben and his car. They wanted to send him an invitation to the second annual Indy Rod and Custom Show. Ironically, in 17 years of age and design, it won a first-place trophy. Can you even imagine that? It was still state-of-the-art, futuristic. I'm going to end here. There's much more that could be said on this. This in here brings up more of his titles. I'm not going to elaborate on it. This one here, again, I did bring up the AAA membership. This picture here is actually clipped from the Hot Rod magazine from 1951, where they were looking for Ben to send him an invitation. The car at this point in time was still the Chrome Metallica, as DuPont called it. Benjamin F. Harris III, AAA, SCCA, and FIA racing license over 3 decades. National International Race Organizer, track official, and original stockholder in Road America. Held 3 authoritative national SCCA positions. 1952 front row for the Glenn's Last Queen Catherine Cup race. This was used for Ben's induction into the Walk of Fame. Thank you again, Mr. Bill Green, for helping me out there again. But this is supposed to be with that, because Ben was on that day, that tragic day. Ben was on the front row of the one race, but it wasn't a race in which Fred Wacker slid and unfortunately hit the one child. In ceremony, Ben and Jim Kimberly were awarded special medal lifetime SCCA membership cards. I have yet, maybe somebody can help me, I have yet to find anything of a ceremony whenever they retired after 10 and 12 years of building the national level, at their own expenses too. If somebody knows of that, I'd sure like to have it. Again, the email address is at the bottom of the presentation. This here is the first edition, let's say, the first 10 years of Road America. Harris was active in the development of racing throughout the 30s through the 50s. The lower photo represents the inaugural race at Road America. Harris was nominated and selected as a track official for the inaugural event. Harris was an original stockholder and designer of the track, as we previously mentioned. The records of this are at the Chicago SCCA archival department, where it shows they took a vote and they nominated Ben to be, I guess, the track official and the official flagman. That is a picture of, I believe it's Phil Hill and Sherwood Johnson gone past Ben at 130 miles an hour. And I believe it was, well, anyway, I don't know the full details, way too much to know about this. And this story could go off on more. And again, like I said, I really feel sorry that the one gentleman passed that was up there. I enjoyed speaking with him. Sorry, I can't remember his name at this point in time. Part 2. Now we're getting into the actual racing part. We did want to bring in some about the Speedster so people have a better knowledge. It does have at a site that I consider one of the best in the world, 140,000 reads. Is the 65-year-old mystery of SCCA's early development solved? The question was initially posed in this edition of SCCA magazine by Executive Director of the SCCA. Last name was Bird. This is the front cover. Ironically, I'm not sure what model or make of vehicle it is going over the tracks, There's a picture of Ben going over the same tracks airborne in one of his MGs that he raced. Sorry. This SCCA article written by the executive director acknowledges that SCCA records were sketchy and very incomplete. Unfortunately, this void severely limited the ability to identify and recognize the individuals who made significant contributions to the transformation of the SCCA from a regional to a national organization. This was published in SCCA publication 1959. I do believe it was February. And what the executive director says is when after the war, the ARCA was not reactivated to any great extent. A group of enthusiasts in Boston founded the Sports Car Club of America in February of 1944. And I'm sorry, but this is in direct contradiction to California claiming it in 1948. The club's growth from then on is a matter of pride and common knowledge to the membership. This account, it is well realized, is sketchy and very incomplete. And through inadvertence of poor memory, many names having been omitted that should have been set down. But the records have almost without exception disappeared or been destroyed, and this brief fragmentary sketch is set down with the hope that it may prove of some interest to present-day enthusiasts, despite its very incomplete nature. So with the thought from little acorns, etc., we set the time machine back to the present and take our somewhat creaking departure. Well, yes, it was solved, at least we believe so. That'll be up to the audience and the different people listening, archivists and historians. Fragmentary, yes. And we know of two more of records were lost, unfortunately, when they were moved from back east, I think, to Indiana. I think about maybe 1 or 2 dumpster loads were thrown away. Not through any fault of the person doing it. It just didn't have enough help, didn't have enough, well, anyway, it was something that happened that made life very difficult for us. I did go to Indy one time. They had not broken out and researched a lot of their AAA early races. They concentrated more so on Indy. Ironically, in the same picture, this Maserati that they're showing up there, we have that Maserati on film. Like I said, there's sub-stories up the gazoo in this story. This picture here, at one time, Mr. Bill Green at the Glen did tell me who the other 3 people were. And I think he said it was a one lady's car. I can't think of her name. That Ben has her on film too, that we have. Ben was a rally official at this. He was already digging in to statuses of the SCCA at the regional levels and such. It would be my guess he was probably quite good friends with the whole clan up there. He is wearing his rally event official jacket, which this is the last street race. Well, anyway, I'll talk about it later on. But that is Ben there. And again, Bill Green knows the people that are in that picture. And I lost it, Bill. I'm so sorry. Here's a picture of the same race in 1952. It would say rally on the back of it. This is Harris being interviewed at the 52 SCCA Watkins Glen race. Harris served as a SCCA National VP, Public and other leadership positions for the National SCCA, which we have discussed in part only. This is one of the 3 MGs that Ben raced through the 12 years. Always had white walls on it and always had BFH on his license plate. And he also had on all of his cars, this kind of neat. Ben was wealthy. He had a silver mascot for opening up the hood of the Speedster and on the radiator of this MG of a character called Adolf, and it was a Jacques Cartier original that Ben had. That's kind of the way he was. Tragedy at Watkins Glen. Last lap for road racing. Period, horrible period. Harris worked closely with Wacky Arnault, Jim Kimberly, Harley Earl, amongst others, to rebuild after the tragedy at Watkins Glen. In part, together they tackled design and construction of Road America, advocating the use of airports for future events and an emphasis on safety measures for both drivers and spectators. I know that Ben, which they're in his car's seat belts and a built-in roll bar, Ben was constantly pushing that to become the law in SCCA racing, and in hopes that even Formula One would pick it up for the safety of the drivers. A few things that people didn't realize, but yeah, Ben had seat belts in his car. It was quite amazing. Anyway, this was a bad time. Everything had to change at this time. Racing in Europe had changed. Mercedes had just had a horrible wreck, and I think 40 or 50 people were killed. And they actually pulled out of racing in entirety for decades. It went to future events, which ended up being, I guess, getting not thrown out, but asked to stop. But here's a few other things that the archivists and historians might like to know. We have a Boeing SCCA trophy. Yeah, Ben advocated and held and officiated at SCCA base racing for racing planes. And to take it further, was throwing the international flag at the first kart SCCA competition in the world. A few other little tidbits to show Ben's positioning of what he did. Anyway, I'm going to move on. This has been with the General, a 1954 Chanute Air Force Base event. Estimated attendance was 80,000 over the 3-day event. Race car builder and legend Wacky Arnault is a whimsical point, and his wife were filmed checking race cars into the event. If you can imagine, even back then, a multi-millionaire even owning one of the towers at Sebring, where the crews and Ben and everybody else would get to go on top and watch the races. You'll see Ben's BFH USA plate. If you look close, you'll see Adolphe, the Jacques Cartier, and then basically the line of cars, and in the background, this was a huge event. All of this, the 2 years that they held this, was all in the plot, let's say, of what they were doing in building Road America. This here is just one of the many SCCA articles that we have. I think we have about 95 SCCA Sports Car of America magazines. But anyway, it just brings in again that this one here shows Ben as the SCCA Publications Director. Oh, dang. This one here shows Ben as the SCCA Vice President. I think Ben moved around through the groups here, more or less to accomplish things that they wanted to get done. And his associationship with Kimberly was really not known that well, but at the same point in time was very strong in doing what they did with the SCCA, along with other, let's say, powerful, known individuals. This in here, we have, I think, 5 of the different proposed rules changes and formula changes and stuff. As I mentioned, some of these rules were probably being written up while they're driving on Road America while it was still in dirt, shaking the track down. It does show Ben Harris down there as a director of publication. And these other names that come up through here we have pictures of Ben with them, just not being shown now. We have so many more documents. We had to limit ourselves. You know, we're looking for a writer. There's a lot to this, and let's just say that it changes things as from the way many people thought it was. But anyway, I'm going to move on to the next one. This in here is whenever Ben was, I guess, nominated again or for whatever Or maybe because there's probably shortages of people that were allowed to throw the FIA flag that were FIA licensed here in the United States. I pose that as a question to historians. This race, 59, was being covered by NBC. I truly would like to find someone that can get into the NBC archives, because we're sure it's going to show Ben all over the place because he flagged about everything. I mentioned the first kart competition. That was all taken care of in the Speed Week, and showing Ben as the flagman of the whole thing. This brings forth that Ben, I guess, had enough power where he stopped the live broadcast, and it caused a heated debate between Team Roosevelt and Franklin D. Roosevelt team. Excuse me. And but anyway, and the A-Bars. They were not allowed back on the track, but think of the power he carried to stop the whole international race. In here, you see a lot of the names of the people, the Scarab cars. You see Pabst in there. You see Donald Healy in there. You see Duncan. See Shelby's name. All of these people are the ones that Ben ran with. I guess they all wanted to be friends with Ben too, when you think about it. But this is the televised event, and we'd sure like to find. We know Ben was there in 1958 too. You would have thought that the kidnapping of Juan Fangio would have maybe scared the person off for 1959 for other possible events. But needless to say, Ben stood up, he took it, and it all turned out well. Much more to be said about this. This one here is where Ben is throwing a flag. We believe this was the 59 Nassau Bahamas Speed Week. Again, the international flag. In this group of cars are the most famous legend and race drivers ever recorded in the history books. This image raises the question, how many FI race officials were active in the US in 1959? As I mentioned prior, I'd sure like to find that out. And again, Ben, his cap on, cigarette, he always had cigarettes, and his official shirt, always wanting to be very efficient and put on a show, and have all the drivers and teams do the same. Much more to be said about this picture and with the Rodriguez brothers. This here is a picture of Carroll Shelby and Ben Harris. Not sure what Ben's doing, but again, his attire. And you'll notice too, he has his SCCA stopwatch on his belt. That comes into a lot of pictures that we have of him. Shelby was driving his Maserati Birdcage Works car. Note the Harris front-wheel drive Speedster Birdcage design was produced 24 years prior to the Maserati. Ben, we have pictures of Ben with Gurney, Juan Fangio, Moss, the generals, many. This picture is on use, and we have donated money to use the pictures from the Henry Ford Museum for the purpose of student and historic knowledge for records and such. This one here gets real interesting. This is Jim Kimberly and Ben Harris again. They were recognized in the first edition of Sports Illustrated in August 1954. Wow, how did they ever get that done? Why wasn't Pebble Beach, Indy, or Watkins Glen used? And why were Jim Kimberly and Ben Harris featured? Could it be because of the title, New Heraldry, bringing in new vision, dress codes, racing rules and regulations, safety aspects, and formulas for drivers and race teams to follow, which ironically, it seems like all the teams to this very day were inspired, as it's still going on with team colors and team wardrobes. What can I say? This again, though, I believe the one lady where they bring in, it's either Briggs or Strand, it's actually Briggs and Strand, one of the family members. There was a wealthy that was really into this, and some of the other common people as is today, which mostly constitutes the SCCA in their membership. But anyway, there's a lot more to be said about this too. But we're going to move on. This is another way that Ben Harris found, together with his friends Harley Earl and Flagol, and others. Forgetting Wacky, his good friend. Concept car and the Harris Speedster were marketing techniques Benjamin Harris used to draw crowds at many racing events throughout the U.S. 1952 to 60. Ironically, I will mention at the inaugural race at Road America, Preston Tucker did have one of his Tuckers at that too, promoting the concept car and everything else. And by the way, I find this entertaining, and not to take away from anybody, but the new design custom, I believe that's one of Flagol's there. They are not looking too hard at that. This is 52. Ben's car is 17 years old. It seems like it's still drawing lots of people around it. And right in front of it is the Fordelac. Yes, Ben was also good friends with the Granatellis. This is ones that they actually built for him, cut the body, put in the different rear end, knock off wheels. And anyway, he used it as a tool, the Bat Alpha, to take this into focus a little bit more. Ben had just driven it 2 weeks prior to a big Indy race, where ironically, many of the people that were there were going to be present coming at the Chanute race that had almost 80,000 people there. Harley Earl's concept car, I think that's one of the Cadillacs, maybe, I can't remember, I'm sorry. But the point is Ben used every tool that he could get. There's also rally events, which involve sometimes 30-mile drives. But he wanted to draw as many as possible, and I'm sure everybody around him agreed, and they all participated in their plot that they were unleashing. Much more to be said about Harley and Ben's one-off Corvette from the design studio. A lot more to be said. This here I'd mentioned to you, Benjamin Harris captured while serving as a race official of the first World SCCA FIA Kart Championship. Harris recognized that kart racing provided an incubator for tomorrow's motorsports champions, which it did. Again, this is from the collection of the Henry Ford Museum archives, under use with permission for student and historical value purpose. There's a lot more to be said about this picture too. If you look in the background, you'll see all the stands are full of people. He must have been bouncing everywhere over that whole 10 days for this event. This one here, this Road America Big Bore event is what it was termed. This is 58 or 59. I believe it's 59. Again, Harris can be spotted wearing a signature English flat cap and an SCCA official shirt with his hands-on car number 119. This photo is one of many SCCA events officiated by Harris. This was Road America. It could have been one of the June races. I'm not sure. But anyway, there's much more to be said about this, including this number 60 Jag. I think this is the 60 Jag that won the inaugural race at Road America. Not sure. Not enough time in the day after 35 years to keep going. I've got to end this. I'm sorry. As we saw it, bringing Tracy Bird back into it, it ends here as the work needed to create a national and united SCCA was finished. Tracy Bird, Executive Director, SCCA, 1959. There's several articles on this, but what it all boils down to is the fact being that I think the one race, I can't remember the track, maybe it was Riverside, but there were 5 different racing organizations trying to rule the race, which was not working. They all had different formulas. They had this, they had that, and it wasn't working anymore. Names like Jack McAfee, Nethercutt, Jim Kimberly, and even Ken Miles come up in this, where they're all arguing over. Apparently, there was a lot of arguing. And when it all settled down, the SCCA was the national organization that they were going to be racing under from then on. They had their other races, but they were not sanctioned, nor could they use the SCCA logoing for anything. And Tracy Bird seemed to think at the end of it all that this was the big merger. It came out of a desert deal between four people and was a good one for SCCA. And yes, it was. And again, from this point in time, we could go on with Ben and the racing, but the last picture we have was at a Michigan racetrack, and he was looking at the gas cap of an AC Cobra, doing a post-race inspection of the car that won the race, the AC Cobra. This is me. Thank you again, Mr. Bill Green. Benjamin F. Harris III is inducted into the SCC Walk of Fame September 2020. The recognition was accepted on behalf of Harris by John Yasenko. A sincere thank you to Mr. Bill Green again. Oops. This is on the courthouse steps at Watkins Glen. Bill was very kind to let us put on a nice display of posters, which people really seemed to enjoy, which was part of Ben's racing history and organization. I'd like to point out that for additional information on Ben, there's a site called Auto Puzzles. I believe it is the largest site for archival automobiles from around the world that there is. I think it was last year, I looked, they had over 9 million reads. This very rough story, far less than what we've presented here today, is there at Auto Puzzles. And I'm happy to say that it's had roughly 140,000 reads with the links at the bottom that all tie into the life and times of Benjamin Harris III. The email address to contact me, as we decided to do remote rather than live, is capital B, capital J, capital H, capital S, PEEDSTER at outlook.com. Feel free to send any information, any pictures, or any questions you have about the car, its restoration, or anything else. And also, if you want to get in and look at this, the American Pickers came here to History Channel and filmed an episode, gave them about maybe 30 seconds, 40 seconds on the car. It was their focus and my focus. The episode is called Tough Texas. I guess it turned into a favorite there. Unfortunately, they still make you pay to watch the episode, even though it's 7 years old. And they want to come back and do an update on the car and the story in the future. These are notations of all our sources. We do not operate on speculation or assumption. This whole story and the documents that are shown to you are actual documents that are backed up. A lot of the things that we've read about racetracks and this person and that person, we've never seen an ounce of documentation to back it up. We, on the other hand, have become totally overwhelmed with what we have. We actually made, you can see a few of the posters here. We have 48 posters made because the story got to be so unbelievable that it was hard to even rationalize what had went on that got missed all through the decades. We have more. This is 29 documents, I believe, of 118 that we have. Again, we have to thank the Arkansas Symposium, the Society of Automotive Historians, IMRRC at the Glen, and again, Mr. Robert Barr, Ruben Verdez, my brother Dan Yasenko, my son John Yasenko, and probably hundreds more that will come out later in another presentation when we do one more so on Ben himself and really lay down the documents on the Harris Speedster and the other 25 documents on his racing, which were being held back. We just can't give it all away. Not 35 years of work is deserving of a book. I want to thank everyone again for their time, and I hope that this knowledge that we've passed on is beneficial to some in their research and in their museums and archives. Thank you so much.